funny.
Why? Go ahead.
I want to say almost like, hey, cats and kittens.
Whatever you need to do.
All right. Hey, welcome to Leadosophy. You're here with an open mind because that's the rule.
And not the exception.
Today is the 100th episode of Leadosophy, and I am going to steal the microphone a little bit from Tim because he's obviously had it for 100 episodes. I actually asked if I could do this. I asked if I could interview him a little bit. This setup has been a little bit challenging. I'm in my low red and pink seat, so he's joining me on the...
I'm almost sitting on the floor. Feels like I'm sitting on the floor.
And...
What I wouldn't do for you.
For me, this is for Leadosophy.
What I wouldn't do for you and Leadosophy.
So my goal today is to try to give you some insights into a little bit of what I see on the day-to-day from Tim as he's gone through this journey. So I hope you're excited for it, and away we go.
Here we go.
Are you ready to permanently fuse leadership and philosophy? Then a word of caution. You are about to enter the fully abstract yet wholly concrete realm of Leadosophy. Our ideas are not always so clear and distinct. To validate this proposition, we welcome the host of Leadosophy, Tim Wood.
All right, so let's kick this off a little bit. So it's already been pretty fascinating. We're on your 100th episode. I'm watching you set up. I'm watching you use the soundboard you have. We had to bust out this whole Pelican case.
You got the fan on?
Oh, I do have it's so hot in here. So he did tell me, so that's part of it though. You know, we moved across the country this summer, new space, new office. We're on the 3rd floor of a pretty classic DC row home. And part of that is heat rises.
It's spicy up here in the summertime.
It's spicy up here right now, so...
Even if you have the AC on in the summertime in our row home, the 3rd story is unbearably hot.
Yeah, so you had said something about it, but until about this moment, I didn't realize how warm it had gotten. But so in a new space, again, the last time I sat for your podcast was, I think, about a year ago or a little less, and we were on the kitchen table in Long Beach, Washington, and I think that was in your earlier episodes, and you were kind enough to invite me on. But really why I asked to come on is to kind of like ask you some questions and kind of put you in the hot seat a little bit on some of your leadership theories and things like that you've shared with us over the years.
So should be exciting. I'm excited to tell you how much I have not learned. Now, actually, I've learned a lot I've learned mostly from just some of the guests I've had. I haven't had too many guests. I think out of 100 episodes, I've probably had maybe 8 to 10 guests on. I want to do that more. I should do that more because I was even writing about it earlier as I was kind of thinking about moving forward, what I want to do with Leadosophy, what I want to talk about. You can do all the reading about leadership you want. You can watch all the videos, but for me, it's talking to other people and hearing their conceptual framework of leadership. That's how you add to your knowledge base or your concepts of leadership. The more I talk about leadership, the more I hear other people talk about it, the more I realize that you could just go down a rabbit hole of leadership to infinity. So
who would be your like dream guest? Who would be like, if you could have anybody on here that you would want? Anybody. And I mean like no option. Like anybody you just call up and they're here tomorrow. Who's that person going to be?
You kind of put me on the spot. I haven't had any opportunity to dream guest. I don't know.
And it can be living or dead.
Living or dead?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really tough. I tend to want to go back to philosophy, right? So crazy enough, this is it's leadership and a philosophy podcast for me, but there's a lot of philosophers out there that I would love to have a conversation about leadership because, again, to me, leadership is a lot of philosophy. It's a lot of philosophical thinking. And there's a lot of philosophers that I would like to talk about leadership, maybe get them out of their comfort zone and say, hey, what does leadership mean to you as a philosopher? And maybe that would help me, kind of, I guess, bolster my arsenal of the fusion of philosophy and leadership. But to pin down one philosopher, I don't know if I could do that. I would love to talk to Aristotle.
Aristotle? You want to Bill and Ted it back to Aristotle?
Yeah, I could totally Bill and Ted it back to Aristotle. And that's maybe cliche.
Is that Aristotle? Oh, wrong way.
That is Aristotle. The
Right
bust,
there.
Aristotle bust. And that might be a little cliche and probably like an easy picking, and someone they say, oh, really Aristotle? But yeah, I mean, I look at the works of Aristotle and what he wrote, and just to be able to put thousands of pages of volumes of on metaphysics and all this stuff, like virtue ethics. I love virtue ethics. Going through my grad school program at Gonzaga, a big part of our leadership program was, well, I guess not a big part of it, but definitely a couple classes, virtue ethics came into the picture, and it's still a prominent leadership theory, and that's Aristotle. Aristotle was the pioneer of virtue ethics, one of the pioneers of virtue ethics from the ancient Greek days.
So it's interesting that, of course, not interesting, because obviously Leadosophy, the fusion of leadership and philosophy, right? The name itself says it. But you went to philosophy, and you've taken a lot of heat over the years. Just a little recap. When we left New Haven, Connecticut 7 years ago, am I right on that? There were some life choices had to be made. It was, I got a job in South Florida, and Tim was going to be up in Connecticut, and he decided to step aside from his career and move down to Florida. And, then what do I do? What do I do? You ended up going to...
What do I do with my hands?
You ended up going to Florida Atlantic University. Shall we? Do we dare?
Shout out Florida Atlantic.
Owls up.
Owls up.
Owls up.
Owls up.
So
great school, by the way, Boca Raton, Florida. Really beautiful place.
Yeah, and he was only 38, but he was the 40-year-old freshman to everyone on campus, and you had the big old freedom beard going. I don't know if you can chop in a picture of you with your big old freedom beard.
Yeah, and if you're listening, you just have to visualize the big beard. It was probably a solid 6-8 inches long.
Yeah, it was
my first one, and I've grown it out 4 to 5 times since
You've gone through 4 or 5 freedom beards, and then a lot of renditions, the millennial mullet. I don't really know where we're going with the current construct right now. I think you're just letting it fly, right?
Nobody knows.
Getting that McConaughey sway.
Yeah, nobody knows where my hair is going.
Yeah, it's like Phil Mickelson meets Matthew McConaughey meets, the wind.
You're very kind.
Maybe potentially biased. Yeah. That's all right. But back to topic. So you've taken a lot of heat on getting a degree in philosophy. It's funny. Everybody kind of family, friends, strangers. First question that everybody's like, oh, what are you studying? Second question, what are you going to do with that?
What am I going to do with a philosophy degree?
Right.
Yeah.
And what I find fascinating is, so I just recently started a strategy and war course at the Naval War College. Something to do on my off time, read hundreds and hundreds of pages about, most recently the Peloponnesian War. And what I have found most striking about it all is it's very heavily philosophical. At least definitely in the first, from Sun Tzu to Clausewitz to Masters of War to, I'm trying to think of all the books that, we've been trying.
Plutarch.
Yep, Plutarch. Just finished Plutarch. But it's very, very, very heavily based.
Thucydides.
Yep, Thucydides. Oh, that hurt.
Yeah.
My brain hurt for a month after that. Honestly, I got to give a shout out to the professor, because that was some dense, deep reading, and I had to rely on you. But, they've mentioned Kant. They've mentioned, who else? There's been tons.
You talked about utilitarianism, Jeremy Bentham, John Stuart Mill.
Yep. And I just find it interesting that for as, potentially useful, you need to adjust that a little bit. Sorry, I kind of jacked up the stage lighting around
here. We're on the fly here. This is good.
And it's kind of at night too, so we're working it out.
Yeah. That's better.
Yeah. Sure. So why do you think there is such a stigma against philosophy, and people find it so useless, but yet it has been so instrumental and useful since, the dawn of time.
You want my theory?
Yes. Obviously, yeah.
Well, because to make money, everyone needs to get a business degree. Everyone needs to own a business, make capital. There's not a lot of the Western way, I think, a capitalistic mindset. And I'm not saying this is a good or bad thing, but the capitalistic mindset is making money. We're very much a money-driven species, at least from a Western society standpoint. There's not, I guess you could make the argument, there's not a lot of money in philosophy. You're not going to make a lot of money as a philosopher, and that's just statistically proven. If you're into philosophy, or if you go take a 18 or 19-year-old student that wants to get an undergraduate degree in philosophy, I mean, try to convince that student that they have a bunch of roads they can take afterwards. And there are a lot of success stories of teenagers, people in their young 20s doing philosophy degrees and being successful in the business world. I mean, that's a real thing.
And something I've noticed too is that, classically trained students are still, our nieces are learning philosophy. You can have he can have a more intelligent conversation with, our 16-year-old niece, Nora, than he can with me on philosophy, to be honest. And that's just kind of how she learned and was, went to school. And that was something that they focused on there.
Which is honestly, it's the way it was 2,000 years ago. There was a very well-rounded, a lot of philosophers 2,000 years ago were, and not just Western philosophy, Eastern philosophy as well. They were well-rounded in the sciences, mathematics. They had a very well-rounded education, which I'm not saying that doesn't happen nowadays, but it seems like you're very much starting to get stovepiped into certain directions,
So then back to my point, though, that as I'm learning about extremely successful, people and their histories and their careers and things of that nature, it seems that philosophy plays a part in almost all of those people. And so I'm trying to reconcile why it seems so negatively, so frowned upon.
I don't know. I think there's all kinds of stigmas with philosophy. One is maybe philosophers are too pretentious. They think they're smarter than everybody. I mean, there's a bunch of stereotypes. There's always stereotypes about every group of people, whatever it is, different subjects. And again, there's just a lot of stereotypes out there about philosophers. And again, we could probably go into a bunch of them, but.
Yeah. And so not to just go down that road, but to go down the road of, and I don't, I'm trying to recall if you talked about it on your previous podcast, but you chose philosophy. And I remember this because I remember the day that you did. You chose to get a degree in philosophy because you wanted to learn how to think for yourself.
That's correct.
So
I valued the thinking process. I started my last few years in the military. I started really, the more I read, I started getting into some deeper reading, and I started valuing just the process of thought. And I wanted to further that. I wanted to become a better thinker. And whatever it was, just whatever. I didn't want to, I just want to be a better thinker. That was the goal.
So speaking of those last few years in your career, and you've touched on it again a little bit over episodes, but if you may or may not remember, in his last few years of his career, Tim was heavily into the risk management, organizational risk management, and the mishap world. He was working through how to kind of revamp and revise.
Mishaps are accidents, right?
Accidents, yeah. Mishaps are accidents. I mean, mishap's a mishap. And you were kind of looking and working towards how to revise the risk-making process from all the way from a teaching standpoint to the actual real-time implementation of risk management in an operational sense, from the deliberate to the strategic to the real-time. And so did you think that led you down this path of not independent thought, but the significance of thought?
Yeah. So when I started getting involved in the risk management program, started teaching it, I found myself very drawn to the process of expanding my knowledge on the subject. And it was a twofolded quest. It was a quest to give people the best information they could have, current information, because I knew teaching risk management, teaching leadership was part of that, teaching some leadership in the risk management process. I felt that the better I was, the better armed I was with current knowledge and human error, things like that, the better prepared I could make people that I was teaching, and ultimately hopefully made them safer, made the boat crews out performing the mission safer. But a byproduct of that was I started becoming just thoroughly immersed in the quest for knowledge. And that quest for knowledge became not only the quest to know, but also the quest to think. And yes, it was, and I started getting into some philosophy in there, reading some philosophers. And yes, it all kind of merged at the time. And then when I got out of the Coast Guard, I didn't know that I wanted to study philosophy. But when you suggested I go back to school, for some reason, it was like, I want to study philosophy. That's what I want to do. And granted, now go back to the stigma of philosophy. Like, I maybe couldn't have done that when I was 19 years old, because maybe you wouldn't have paid the bills or whatever the stereotypes.
Your mind was open.
When I was older?
Yeah.
It was older, but I also was retired. I'd finished my career. I had you to kind of to lean on a little bit. So I had that. I had the freedom to go back to school for something that I thoroughly thought I would love. And it turned out to be, it's true. I loved it.
And I think it's one of the most fascinating things about you that, again, people might not know about, or maybe they've discovered it over time, is you are, and one of my favorite things about you is that this man is not afraid to learn a new skill at all. I mean, I'm sure you have some stopping points.
I played pickleball today for the first time ever.
Oh, that's right. You did play pickleball today. How'd that go?
I won 1 game out of 3 against John. Humbled, shout out for John to teaching me a new game. Super fun. I like it because the court's so small.
Yeah, which is ironic because we just came from Washington State, which I believe is
and Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, where pickleball was the thing, and we've somehow missed this game.
Yeah, so I enjoyed pickleball because the court's really small. The wind was blowing 30 knots.
I was going to say, this was, you did pick a pretty challenging weather day. So fall is here. Fall's here
in DC.
DC.
But I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was kind of like ping pong on steroids.
Yeah, but again, to my point is ping pong on steroids. All right. So we're just going to digress a little bit. This is very calm, philosophical man. Apparently, again, when he gets on a basketball court, flag football, dare I say, ultimate frisbee, shout out Patrick Dixon for how many times did you race him? And we're still trying to figure out what the actual results are.
He won the first one. I won the second one.
So it's up for debate. So I'm sure Patrick Dixon, if he does listen, will definitely have something to say about that. But this man gets a competitive streak, and all of this calm, philosophical, thoughtful, intentional goes out the door. And I
like to compete.
It's aggressive.
I grew up playing sports. Sports was a big part of my life growing up.
Yeah, but foosball is not.
Yeah, I love playing foosball. You name it.
Ping pong, anything, and I know anybody that's stationed with you will definitely chime in.
Yeah, if I play a sport, even if I've never played it before, you're gonna get my best effort. It may be ugly, but you're gonna get the best effort.
So, all that to come back to the fact that what I was talking about and you learning new skills, right? So, back to the mishap, the last 2 years of your career. Not only were you learning how to research, understand thought, understand why people make mistakes, how they can.
Yeah, that was a great one. That's a very good point. I wanted to know the thought, the theories, and the psychological underpinnings of why people made mistakes. Why did human error exist?
And why is it the most prevalent reason that mistakes happen? It's not typically equipment failure. It's not anything other than a large majority of it is human error, judgment, things like that. So as you're going on this quest, the other quest you go on is, okay, now how do I explain this?
Right.
How do I create these medians to explain it? In comes the rabbit hole of PowerPoint. And I know this is a weird place to start, but you started off basic PowerPoint, shout out Microsoft. And And you seek out all of these different creative ways to make your PowerPoints more engaging. And I'm curious as to what made you do that. Like, you could have just gone the route of everybody else, but, you start with just basic PowerPoint. You find presenter media, I think it is. I don't know if we can say that, trademark, hashtag, whatever. Your PowerPoints are now animated. You are presenting, you are obviously a very skilled orator and you're a good teacher. So that just like helps out. And then that turns into podcasting, which has evolved to where we're at right now. I mean, I think sometimes I don't know. I watch in fascination as you progress through these different levels of your technological experience. Like, what inspires that? Like, if somebody is they're sitting at home and they're like, Tim doesn't know what he's talking about. I could do a better podcast than this. Like, it's not as simple as, it's you.
Well, I mean, so it could be simple. Like I've evolved. So I am, me, I've always loved technology. Mm-hmm. So I think I watched my dad build his first computer when I was like, our first computer when I was like 8 years old. So
now your youngest son is into that as well.
Yeah. So I've always been in kind of the forefront of computers from a very early age in the 80s. So technology has never scared me. And technology nowadays is fascinating. There's so much you can do with it. But starting off like you want to say someone can just do a better podcast than me on leadership. And I'm sure they're out there. There's probably plenty. But anyone can get a basic computer and a little USB mic and start a podcast. My thing is like, I just tend to go, me, I tend to go above and beyond. Like, and I can do that. Like we have the opportunities to upgrade some equipment, and I just enjoy putting out the cleanest product I can visually. I'm very visual. I love the visual side. Going back to creating the PowerPoints and stuff like that, I want people to have a very, very good visual experience. So I have some of this equipment for me to be able to deliver that. I have to have some of this equipment.
Which also I have to apologize for. So where he is usually the audio visual person, I'm usually the kind of construction person. So I'm sure you guys have noticed. Oh, hang on. It's very unprofessional of me. Oh, Valerie. Our homegirl Val up in, or actually down in Florida now. So I'm usually the person that like fixes stuff, and I've let you down a little bit because in between these bookshelves here, there is the Leadosophy banner that I have yet to figure out how to hang up in the background for you and give you a proper background for your. But I mean, this is just a portion of his philosophy books, so that's also kind of suiting, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of. They're not all philosophy books. Some of them are yours too, but yeah, there's definitely some philosophy books up there.
Yeah, so
and like anyone's bookshelf in the background, I've not read every book back there. So
you haven't?
No, not everyone.
What, just mine?
There's a lot of books back there that I've read parts of, 3/4 of.
Yes, other fascinating thing. He can read multiple books at once.
Yeah, I can't read. It's very rare that I'll ever read one book all the way through. I
think there's something more to that. I'm sure there's a reason, or there's some sort of gift that you have. You're able to do that. I can barely read one book at a time. So as he,
I think it's probably a attention deficit thing. I gotta lose interest real quick and go to something else.
Well, you get hit on the footnotes, and then you see a footnote, and then a day later, that footnote, the book that's referenced in the footnote, shows up on our doorstep.
Footnotes that's probably why I haven't read every book back there. It's because you get through about 7 or 8 footnotes, and next thing you know, I have like 8 books showing up in the mail.
It's a true story.
But I do like to jump back and forth between books.
Yes. I mean, the running joke around the house is, there's another book on the doorstep. So I don't think we have to worry about anybody coming up on the stairs and stealing our packages, because they'd probably pick it up and be like, throw it right back down.
Books.
But again, we digress. But back to your ability and your desire to learn new skills. It was pickleball yesterday. 3 weeks ago, we went to Zion National Park, and you were rappelling down canyons and, down climbing and doing all these crazy things probably around February. we had an opportunity to go snowboarding. So you learned how to snowboard.
That was my second time snowboarding, though.
Yeah, but so
which was far more enjoyable than the first time.
This is true, but the first time was only 2 years prior. So pre-COVID, post-COVID. Imagine if there was never any COVID, you would have probably snowboarded a lot more.
I would have. I enjoy snowboarding.
Yeah, it's just there's this thing that you have where, oh, do we dare talk about the thing you learned how to do in Fossil, Oregon on our very first camping experience? You learned how to camp. We learned how to camp.
That was a team effort.
That was a big team effort. But do we dare learn about the skill you picked up in Fossil, Oregon?
What skill was that? Jump in the poop tank?
No, that was
that was camping, but
that was camping. The wood experience, the wood chopping experience.
Oh, I chopped wood for the first time.
Not
that I'm super proud to say that as a 44-year-old human being.
But it wasn't the fact that you were 44 and a dude, so had somehow not done this stereotypical dude thing. It was the fact that you owned it, and you were just like, yeah, you got to tell me how to do it. And I'll be honest, our friend Tim gave you a little look of disgust that you didn't know how to chop wood. But it was that, like, just that lack of self-consciousness that some people have about being able to admit what they do and don't know. It's just something that you've been very good at. Where do you think you learned to not be, is it embarrassed at something I'm trying to see what I'm getting at? Like, where do you
think there's a term you're looking for. It's called epistemic humility.
Okay.
Right.
Enlighten.
Epistemology is the theory of knowledge, right? Epistemic humility is, I think, admitting your lack of knowledge in what you're talking about in certain subjects or areas, right? So where did that come from? I don't know. I was a very shy kid growing up. I never pretended. I don't feel like I ever really pretended like I knew more than I did. And I was always, I think there's a quote, I may be misquoting Abraham Lincoln, but I don't think it was Abraham Lincoln. Someone said the quote, "It's better to be thought a fool and keep your mouth shut than open your mouth and remove all doubt."
Yeah.
Right. So I've always that's, I guess, not one of my main mantras, but that's something I always keep in the back of my mind. I tend not to jump into a conversation if my knowledge of the area in question is not very strong. It's just why, I'll turn around and go find a book and read up on it or learn more about it. And I don't know, I just like to be educated on things I talk about. And it's easy. I think it's easy for any of us, and I've done it before too. I'm not saying that I always do that, but it's easy for any of us to just throw our opinions out haphazardly. I think that's a lot of the problems with a lot of different areas, especially in the political environment that's so charged. It's people throw their opinions out there, and I'd say honestly, a lot more than not, people don't know what they're talking about. And there's so many different sides of every story. There's everyone. I always talk about the shared reality or the not shared reality that people really don't look for, but we all have our own view of reality, and it's always skewed.
And don't you think that is one of the biggest proponents and one of the biggest challenges of being a successful leader is that you can't possibly have everyone's get to a shared reality amongst a group of individuals. I mean, does that...
Yeah, I think there's a difference between in the, maybe say the work environment, vice just everyday conversations that are going on, the milieu that's going on in whatever it's national politics or local politics. In the work environment, yes, you have to try to develop some common operating picture, right? With the term we use in the Coast Guard. You have to try to develop some sort of common operating picture, which is honestly just another phrase for shared reality. It's what that is, right? So, and there's a point where you can do that to a fault, where you can become paralyzed, and at some point, you have to, this is the decision we have to make
a decision,
right? And that's the leader's job, has to determine, because you can always try to seek new information, right? There'd always be more information that'll come in. You could always go down the rabbit hole and you never have enough information. At some point, you got to just make a decision. I think that's part of leadership. You have to determine when that shared reality is close enough. It'll never be completely closed, that reality gap, but at some point it's got to be closed enough where you can move forward as a team. And
you'll never know everything.
You never know everything. That's a fact. And there's always going to be unintended consequences that you just didn't see.
Effects.
Yeah, you just didn't see.
So then going back to, what did you call it?
Epistemic humility.
There you go.
Yes, epistemic humility.
I rely on him to articulate all of my thoughts for me. I think that's something that's worked out really well for me, being married to a philosopher.
Well, I mean, it's just humility in general. I think we've talked about humility and leadership. You know, you've talked about it. Sometimes it frustrates you. You know, you feel like you're always in this place of having to be humble. And, you know, it's just a part for me. I think I said on my last podcast or the podcast before, when in doubt, default to humility. Like it's probably not going to steer you wrong to take a step back and that's not saying like you can't be confident. I think you can be confident and humble together. I don't think those are like either or qualities for characteristics for a leader.
So you just finished this 3-part series on self-doubt.
I did.
And I felt like while listening to that, this was something that I have seen you go through and personally struggle with as far as your podcast, as far as what, you know, should you, you know, I've heard you say, what right do I have to be talking about leadership and all of these things, but is that not just a little self-check? Is that not just a little humility? And can that humility run wild? Because I know it can with me. You know, I've sat on some panels and I've been asked, like, what do I think, you know, is something I need to work on? And you've seen it. I can send myself down a self-doubt spiral if I allow it.
It's better than the opposite, going complete egomaniac. And again, I've seen many of followers wrecked by large egos. So I'd rather see, well, again, I wouldn't rather see.
Have you seen somebody be wrecked by the opposite? What's the opposite of a large ego? I've seen people be wrecked by absolute lack of self-confidence too.
Well, yeah, and it's those are the people I think who are just almost paranoid to make a decision, right? For whatever reason there might be, they're afraid
external, internal.
Yeah, and a lot of times they might be afraid to make a decision because the fear of making the wrong decision. And I mean, you're not gonna survive very long in a leadership role if you're paralyzed to make a decision. And there's a good chance you probably weren't placed in a leadership role if that's how you were. I mean, hopefully the evaluating talent processes work well enough that if you're in a leadership role, chances are you're probably fairly adept at making decisions. And you're going to make bad decisions. We all know that. But yeah, the self-doubt thing is, I've done it before, and I agree. I've done this with podcasting early in the podcast. I mean, there were many months, maybe years before I even started the podcast where I didn't do it because of self-doubt. And again, you remember the first episode I did with Darren. He's the one that kind of...
Yes, that's actually one of the things I was going to
Darren's the one that kind of kicked me off the cliff or pushed me in the deep end, you know, and I was like, yeah, okay, why not? Why not me? Why not my podcast on leadership? Like, again, I said this in the beginning of this episode, we all have a very unique concept of leadership. My concept of leadership, no one else can have, because no one has ever walked in my shoes as a leader and as a follower. Same for you. You have your own unique concept. And when you and I talk about leadership, we start synthesizing our concepts of leadership. And when we start synthesizing our concepts of leadership, you and I develop this brand new concept of leadership, which is like we've never had before. Like right now, we're now developing a brand new concept of leadership. Yeah, which is, that's awesome. That's the dialogic process.
I mean, we should be honest. Sometimes we argue about leadership.
Yeah, and
it's a polite thing to say, synthesizing, which actually you might need to adjust your mic. I don't think anybody can see your face.
Yeah. Is that better?
I think so.
If you're listening, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's, you know, we all have our own concepts of leadership. And again, why I continue to podcast now is because I have my own concept of leadership and I like to talk about it. And again, there's some things that I say that maybe people don't agree with. That's awesome. If I say something about leadership and that doesn't fit your mental model or your conceptual framework of leadership, that causes you to A, maybe reinforce some thoughts you have, or B, go do your own reflection, self-reflection, and kind of just revise your concept of leadership. And that's what we're doing. That's what Leadosophy is about. It's critical thinking, critical thought.
Exactly. So, you know, you were talking about that synthesizing, and I was trying to think of an example where we didn't necessarily agree, or, you know, I'll listen to his podcasts and while I'm your number one biggest fan, and I had this whole dream of like having this big foam number one thing to be like number one biggest fan, and then I was going to have this whole like 100th episode thing, but then life happens, and what we were supposed to be doing this morning.
Maybe I can put some CGI graphics in here.
Yeah, maybe. Well, this morning I planned on doing this hours ago, but then life the day, and here we are at night. So, where was I going with that? See, this is why I don't do this.
We're talking about synthesizing.
Oh, synthesizing. So I'll tell you, I was thinking, and I thought of an example. You did a good series on a Navy article that I had heard about from some friends, and then I had asked
Navy culture.
Navy culture.
Yeah. Risk-averse culture.
And I kind of got frustrated with you because it was back to that sometimes you have to make a decision, to which you reminded me, well, you don't have to make a decision. You're just there to look at the details and discuss all the possibilities. Whereas me, still kind of in a leadership type theory role, not so much a leader in my current position, kind of not, whatever. I got frustrated because I was like, so what would you do? I get frustrated with you because you don't have to make those, you don't have to actually decide on the information that's presented in front of you. But that's a good thing, and you were really good about kind of coming back at me and saying, well, I don't need to make a decision on how to act. I can have a discussion on all the possibilities. Is that an accurate?
Yeah. I mean, it's, again, I'm a complete armchair quarterback now. I did the podcast, I think 5 episodes ago about Nature Suite, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the tomatoes. And that was another example of, I could look at an organization, kind of take some fragments of things that I've read about them, YouTube videos I've watched about the company, and start to form some quasi view of their leadership culture and just their culture in general, the business. But I have no skin in the game. I don't have to worry about, you know what I mean? I had no skin in the game about their culture. I could just kind of armchair quarterback my thoughts, both theory and then obviously drawing on some of my own practical experiences in leadership. But yeah, I don't have to make a whole lot of leadership decisions right now, and quite frankly, I'm okay with that.
I think everybody dies to be in that position as well. Sometimes it is. Yeah,
it's like, somebody on Facebook posted yesterday. They are brand new to a management role, and I belong to like 3 or 4 leadership groups on Facebook. And someone posted that they were just appointed to assistant general manager of their small business, and the first thing they were like, "What books should I read and what videos should I watch?" And my response was, don't read any books right now. Don't watch any videos. It's like, write down, like, why do you want to be an assistant general manager? Why did you aspire? Because she was like, I always wanted to be a general manager. And I'm like, but why? What's the why behind you? Why do you want that responsibility? Right? And that's time for you to start unpacking, like, is it an ego thing? Like, do you need that, like, to fulfill you somehow, to have that responsibility? Because quite frankly, leadership is like, it's a lot of responsibility. I mean, you have the people's lives you're responsible for, their well-being. They're coming to work. It's like, well, we separate work life and home life. I'm like, I hate to break it to you. Sometimes it's really hard to make that line like completely, you know what I mean? Like, it's not always one or the other, right? Sometimes your work life will blend into your home life and you can't help it.
Well, I mean, but people face massive criticism for that. I hate to tell you how deep in the football streets I am, but right now, I mean,
thanks for fixing my lighting, by the way.
You're welcome. I felt a little bit bad. I'm trying to be a good host. I am trying to.
I look like an Oompa Loompa, I think, up until you just fixed that lighting.
Well, I did it. I thought I did a good job. But
we're just on the fly here, like, no big deal.
But so I was going to say, I mean, in the football world, Patrick Mahomes is under fire. Everybody's making all sorts of suppositions, as good news and good media and good TV does, about his home life potentially interfering with his work life and etc. And I agree with you that there should be a line, maybe just in professionalism.
Yeah, for sure.
However, there just is no absolute. It's more of a dashed line.
Yeah, it's
stuff
like,
leads through either way.
I'm a firm believer that as a leader, you're not responsible for everyone's happiness around you, like from the followers. Like, you can never make everyone happy, but you have to pay attention to the well-being of those around you. You should want people to have a good experience, good like work experiences when they're within your purview, within your sphere of influence, right? I think that's I want people, I do want people to be happy, because I think if they're happier at work, they might be more productive. I don't know what the science says behind that, between happiness and productivity, but I think that's a big part of it. And if people are not happy at work, where you spend 1/3 of your life, like, let's just do the math, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, like, you can't tell me that doesn't blend over into the home life. That's unreal. I mean, unless maybe some people are very good psychologically at drawing that line, but I mean, most of us are fairly human, and, sometimes psychologically weak in some areas. And again, I think leadership is about being very conscious of people's happiness and morale and well-being and all that stuff.
So with that being said, you're on your 100th episode. You've increased your means, you've increased your abilities. We haven't even talked about, so this like board thing is awesome, but we haven't talked about the sound effects. And I didn't mean to make such a hard transition, but there you go. Is that the only one? There's more.
Nah, there's more.
What do we got here?
That's
Halloween. Creepy. Why would you? All right. So also things we, speaking of home life, do and don't agree on. Hate horror films. Hate them. Loves horror films.
I love horror films. Loves
them. I don't know what we're going to use the creepy doll voice for in this, but maybe not. But, oh shoot. Getting back to the point, or I just totally lost my train of thought on creepy doll voice.
Yeah, that was good.
Was it?
Yeah.
Is it because it's getting like really hot in here too?
That might be. It's warm in here. It's picked up a few degrees.
Yeah. Do we need to turn the fan back on? Did we talk about this heat issue, or did that get cut out because we were trying to set up?
We already talked about the heat issue.
Man, it's spicy.
What else? But no, talk
so
about?
We're on the 100th episode. So what do you think has been the biggest change from episode 1 to episode 100? Where do you think you're at? Where do you think Leadosophy's at? You like to anthropomorphize Leadosophy.
That's a big word. You should explain what the anthropomorphize means, because I didn't know what it was until not long ago.
I'm going to mess it up and somebody's going to Google fact challenge me, but it's essentially giving a human characteristics to inanimate things.
Yeah, that's a good explanation, I think. Yes. That's fair.
So it's like I call my chair, if I treat my chair like a human and I give it a personality.
Anthropomorphized your chair.
I did. So You've kind of begun, I do know this, that you've kind of, so one of the biggest things that I've noticed that you've kind of done, or you have done, is you've made Leadosophy a person. You've almost given some sort of, short of a background. Oh, the fan. It's hot. You've given Leadosophy, you've made it a person, almost like you talk about it in third person sometimes, as if it's an external part of yourself, or maybe it existed before you or after you, or so. That's the biggest change I've seen over 100 episodes. What say you?
About what? What's the biggest change from episode 1 to 100?
How have you grown over the last 100 episodes?
Well, I think number one, I've grown as just a podcasting person. I think I have challenged myself to get in front of the camera, and I think I've done that honestly for a while now. I've been pretty transparent in my thought process and how I view leadership, and I don't think I've left much on the table. Sometimes it's hard to come up with. For me, it's definitely a lot easier to talk to people about leadership than to just kind of sit there by yourself and talk about your own thoughts, which again, that's how I started it, kind of talk about my own thoughts of leadership. So I think I've gotten better in just kind of putting my thoughts down, kind of, I guess, unpacking my own thoughts on leadership. I always said in the beginning, one of the goals for Leadosophy was to almost field strip leadership, like a weapon, like a gun, and try to figure out what the most essential components of leadership, like if you strip leadership down to its bare components, like what are the most essential things about leadership? And I guess one thing I've grown is that I've realized that I don't think it's possible. I don't think you can do it.
You don't think you can actually strip it down to?
No, I don't think you can. I use here's the analogy I use for that. I feel like leadership is like sand, right? And if you have a mound of sand in your hand and you look at it, right, it's a solid mass. Leadership is like when you start to try to like look at the individual grains of sand and you pull your fingers apart, all that sand just starts to filter away through your fingers and you're left with nothing.
And
that's
then
how I
add
feel.
Wind to it, throw water on it, throw life at it, and
yeah, that's how I feel about leadership. Leadership is a pile of sand that when you really try to close to start looking at it and moving around, it just falls through your fingers and there's nothing left. And again, I come back to this. If you ask 100 people what their idea of leadership is, you're gonna get 100 different answers. And that's just the way it is. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's why leadership has been going on long before there were books, there were podcasts, long before we commercialized the hell out of leadership, making money off of it.
Well, do you think though that organizations, so for example, the military, I hope I don't get this wrong, but we have 28 leadership competencies in the Coast Guard. I mean, do you think that that's us trying to see that one little grain of sand, or we're saying these 28 grains of sand? We're trying to put that elusive definition on what makes or breaks.
You're trying to box leadership into something because that's the human mind works. That's how it works. We want to understand things. We want to be able to break it down into concepts, into things that we can understand and we can talk about and we can use. You know, it's, again, I don't know who said this, but it's like, there's no point of accruing new knowledge if you don't use it, if you don't put it to practical use, right? So from a leadership perspective, what's the point of trying to pursue leadership knowledge if you're not going to try to put that leadership knowledge into some sort of practical use? So again, I'm not saying you throw leadership out with the bathwater, right? I don't think that you should stop all leadership programs and training programs or whatever, but you can't, I think it's very naive for someone to think they can pin leadership down into one or two things, like leadership is this or leadership is that. Like, again, if you told 100 people to say, what is leadership? They would all have a different leadership is this, right? And that's just, again, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. And again, I will say above anything else, leadership is contextual and is situational. And for every situation, for every context that you've had in the past, it'll never look the same in the future. And leadership's going to look a little different every single time.
So would you say then that that's become, so based on what you just said, as you evolved over those 100 episodes, you know, first you started out talking about your experiences, processing your 20 years, what you learned in your undergraduate degree in philosophy, what you expanded upon in your graduate degree from Gonzaga in organizational leadership.
Gonzaga was awesome, by the way, that organizational leadership program.
Yeah, I hope you've talked about that more than I can remember. I was going to say,
I think Gonzaga needs its own episode because I haven't really talked about it.
Yeah, about your experiences, and
I haven't talked about it a whole lot.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Other than the fact that it was a very self-reflective program, which I liked about it.
And so I feel like you did, that's how you evolved. You started off Leadosophy was, you know, a lot of you processing all this new information, layering it on top of your 20-year military career, and then layering that on top of just you as a person and who you are. And then that's when, in my opinion, you start to see Leadosophy develop into its own personality and its own person. And, you know, here we are now, where now you're, you know, created this new thing external to you. What started out internal has now become external. Does that make sense? Is that an accurate assessment? So
internal to external Leadosophy, I basically, as I've said before, I started this journey on Leadosophy, and the podcast was a way to make my private thoughts about leadership and philosophy public. And I think I've done that over 100 episodes. Leadosophy has evolved for me internally, and you've seen it evolve, you know, kind of externally through the podcast. I think I've done a fairly good job of unpacking my own thoughts on the podcast, and I'm happy with that. You know, how long am I going to continue to podcast on Leadosophy? I don't know. I may, you know, maybe Leadosophy will go 1,000 episodes, maybe I'll quit next year. Who knows?
Well, wait, I'm the host. You stole my next question.
Oh,
So we got to back that up.
okay.
How long do you think you'll? No, that wasn't going to be my next question. My next question.
No, that's something I should think about. Like, where do I want it to go? Do I have a goal? I don't know. I just want to continue to think about leadership publicly and in the future talk to more people about it and just evolve my concept, refine my concept of leadership. And if I can help other people along the way or inspire other people, because that was a big part for me of Leadosophy as I kept going. It's like, Leadosophy isn't necessarily about teaching other people how to lead. I never said that going into this, that I wanted to teach other people how to lead. That was never a goal of this podcast, right? Because everyone's got to find their own path. They got to walk their own path.
Which is one of the things we do agree on pretty heavily, and why I fully I support it. We're not necessarily big fans of leadership books per se, prescriptive leadership theories.
Yeah, you ought to lead this way, or you should lead this way.
Or this.
I think that goes because we both kind of believe in the contextual, situational. Everyone's got their own leadership style, and
nobody's getting the same grain of sand.
That's right. And I think there's objectively some leadership styles out there that just fundamentally don't work, right? But even some of those truly bad leaders, quote unquote, bad leaders that you've seen, they're effective for somebody. Somebody gravitates towards that person, right? Like you talk about maybe the worst leader you've ever had, right? Well, the worst leader you've ever had, that's probably the best leader that someone else has ever had.
Exactly. I actually had that. I've had that in my career.
But anyways, exactly. Yeah. That's like, again, it's very subjective at times about who's a good leader. And
somebody I thought was particularly not that great of a leader for me. I was definitely in the minority there. Yeah. Definitely effective for the collective.
Yeah, for sure.
So
yes, totally Leadosophy was not ever meant to be a prescriptive leadership show. And there's those podcasts are out there if you want to go find them. Like there are podcasts out there, they will tell you what you need to do to be a better leader. And there'll be some, I'm not saying I haven't had episodes where I say, hey, I think this works. Like it's worked for me. It may work for you, but it's just tools in the toolbox. But Leadosophy was about inspiring other people to explore their thoughts on leadership deeper, right? That for me is how Leadosophy has evolved externally for me, is hopefully, because I've had, not many, but I've had people reach out to me and say they like listening to Leadosophy because it does get them to think more, right? And I don't want them to think more about what I think about leadership. I want them to think more about how they conceptualize leadership.
So in a sense, if you were doing a means to ends, that's your ends, is getting people to think.
Yeah, and specifically, narrowly, more about leadership and their concept, evolving their own concept of leadership for them to, because everyone wants to, I'm assuming everyone wants to, you have this reality where you are as a leader, and you have this aspiration of where you want to go as a leader, right? Hopefully, growth mindset. I talked about this in one of the self-doubt episodes. Hopefully, if you're in a leadership role, you have a growth mindset where you want to be better, become a better leader, right? Everyone takes that journey and takes those steps in a different way, right? So Leadosophy is really about it's self-exploration. It's a cognitive mining expedition. That's what I call it. It's like digging deep in your own psyche and figuring out what you need to do to better understand yourself so you can help others.
Which is back to my other point that I made earlier, how you can articulate. That's what I love and have found fascinating about Leadosophy, is how well you articulate what myself personally, just speaking for myself, struggle to put to words. So like that cognitive mining, just struggling to put to words why this situation is so challenging, or what has become of it. I think I told you once, I can tell you where we were. We were by Spire McGowan, a church on the Washington side of the Columbia River. And you basically put into words exactly what my problem was that I was having at the time. And I think that you did that, and you did that well because of the work you've put in philosophy and org leadership and just really trying to get to, the why.
Well, yeah. And again, philosophy, Philosophy was very difficult for me in the beginning of my Florida Atlantic career. And you're probably experiencing some of this with some of the books you're reading, like the very heavy philosophical stuff. Like dense reading is like, it's really a practice. You have to deliberately practice reading very dense philosophical material because it's a lot. Like our minds are just lazy. They want to, pick the path of least resistance. And granted, there's some things that can probably be said there's some things that can probably be said in way less words. Some philosophers are very wordy, and I tend to do that. I love
brevity.
Yeah,
love brevity.
There's definitely a means or a reason why brevity works, right? Because if we can only handle so many things. But philosophy was very difficult. The books and the texts that I was reading in my philosophy career were very difficult. But I took that as a challenge. My first semester at Florida Atlantic, I was getting very irritated, and I was in the dictionary more than I was actually reading the textbooks because I had all these new philosophical terms that I'd never heard of, right? All these things, like whatever it was, and I couldn't get through a paragraph without having to look up 3 or 4 words.
But don't you think that's a little bit metaphorical to leadership? Because it's not exactly how we felt and experience leadership coming up through the ranks and coming up through the world. It's not straightforward. It's very convoluted. It's rooted in human nature. It's not there. If there was a dictionary I could have looked to that, when somebody brought me a situation, I could have been like,
let's go to page 7 of the.
Let's go to page 7 of.
There is a. Hold on a second.
I know. It's. I was going to say there is.
There's a
Handbook of Leadership.
Bass Handbook of Leadership. This is like, for me, the Bible of leadership, and this is theory, research, applications, all kinds of stuff.
Which one's the spiral bound one? That was one of your go-tos for a long time.
That was a systems thinking book.
Yeah.
That was probably more a lot of management type stuff, process systems and processes, very managerial focused. I think there's some tie-ins to leadership, but I definitely very system process heavy on fixing processes and not people.
Which people, again, back to that, like
people are slaves to the processes at the end of the day. So
yeah, but leadership for you is more so. I don't think people. Process. I agree, but it is about people. And then going back to what I was saying about that is it a metaphor or analogy or just basically your struggle in learning how to process philosophy is very, in my opinion, step by step. My struggle with learning how to become a leader or if I ever was, or, I also think in a way you don't know until it's over, and then you may never know your effectiveness or ineffectiveness in those positions.
Well, I think for me, back to philosophy is a way, what you have to do, the deeper you get into the world of philosophy, you have ideas, not just ideas about philosophy, but you have ideas about general, you have beliefs, we have belief systems that we lead by or whatever. We have ideas that we live by, we lead by and we live by. But the deeper you get into philosophy, you have this basic idea, but philosophy says, okay, it's very basic. Let's distill that even more, right? Let's get to the really heart of this idea or this belief you have. Why do you have that belief? Right? And being able to explain it. And if you can't explain it very well, get to a point where you can explain this, why you believe this, why you believe this certain way, maybe why you lead a certain way. And being able to get to a point where, okay, I have drilled this down and I can explain this to somebody. This is why I do X, Y, or Z. Because I've thought about this. I've thought about this process over and over again, and I've refined it. And philosophy has taught me how to think critically about it. And if there's some ideas that I have or some beliefs that I have that I have to have an open mind that they may be wrong, right? So I have to refine these beliefs. And I don't know, philosophy I can't say enough about philosophy, what it's done for me. I enjoy it. I love it. I love reading philosophy still to this day. I read a academic paper last night, watching football game, Monday Night Football. I was reading an academic paper on epistemic feedback loops that someone posted on Twitter. And I was like, oh, I'll pull up this. I got through like 7. There's like 32 pages, but I'm on page 7.
Which, there is no lie there. I watch this day in and day out. It fascinates me. It's not just the physical things. It's not just this. Your energy and your ability seek out new things and learn new things. If envy can be seen as can envy be seen as a positive trait?
I mean, as long as it's healthy, I guess. I mean, if it's...
I mean, I envy that about you, but that sounds like negative.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I envy that, though. You know, it's not your ability to run very fast and, you know, all this other stuff. It is just that energy that you carry with you that allows you to expand your mind all the time. I think I find it fascinating that, you know, at a time in your life where traditionally, and I think we see it around us, people's minds tend to close and they get more absolute about things based on their experiences. You're still willing to go out and try new things and learn new things and then come back and reflect on those and then incorporate them into your you know, self-concept and your concept of the world.
Self-concept, I like that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is that...
Self-concept was actually a kind of a broader subject. Self-doubt was one part of that whole, our self-concept, right? Self-doubt is kind of one part of that, or not so much. I talked about self-competence, right? I talked about that on the self-doubt episode. And then you have this like self-liking, right? Do I think I'm a good person? Do I think I'm a bad person? Which is different than, am I technically competent or am I not, right? So, but yes.
Yeah, that could be a whole other episode.
But our self-concept is, I mean, it's a pretty heavy,
huge.
That's
It's
a pretty
massive.
heavy subject.
But it's not just a heavy subject and it's not just a heavy thing. It's the ability to change and adapt your self-concept as you grow and experience, you know, and sometimes that's super painful. I know I have personally gone through very painful moments where my self-concept has changed and it may not have been in necessarily in the direction I wanted to go, but that's just where I ended up at the end of it. So yeah, maybe we'll see an episode on that sometime between 100 and 200.
Yeah, I mean, I think we play a role in shaping our self-concept, and I think the environment shapes our self-concept.
I think how we react to the environment most importantly, right?
Yes.
Nice. Well, I want to thank everybody for letting me take over. Thank you for letting me.
You did great.
Did I?
That's a really good questions. Yeah.
I felt like there was some technical things that I wasn't very good at. I am still burning up, which is probably good because it makes me.
I think one of the kind of the spirit of Leadosophy is inquiry, asking questions, because the root of all knowledge begins with the question. So.
And with that, I'm not out of questions. I am going to ask you to pause for 2 seconds because I forgot my questions. When he interviewed his son, Michael, he did a 10-question, what was it about Heidelberg, about the college he went to. He did a little rapid fire 10 questions on Michael. And so in honor of Michael, and hopefully Carson will be back on one day and we'll do it with him as well, I wanted to give you a little 10 questions that you had to do. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was talking to Mike. There you go. She's still a rookie.
I'm still a rookie.
Podcaster.
But he's going to have to put it on pause, let the music play, and we'll be right back to finish up this 100th episode.
Well, we don't need to pause it. We can just, we can cut the...
Okay. We can just cut it. All right, so can I just do a timeout?
Timeout.
You're leaning forward.
All right, welcome back to Leadosophy.
That was me. I'm the host.
Okay, go ahead.
Hostess.
We're back from the timeout.
We're back from the timeout. All right.
Magically, this new part just showed up.
Apparently, the power of editing. See, I didn't say I was a good podcaster. I just said that I'm learning. All right, so we're back. 100th episode, Leadosophy. We're going to finish it off with a little 10-question round. I lost my questions that I made that were brilliant, so you're just going to have to suffer through the ones that I just sort of kind of remembered. Again, this was he kind of did this to his son, Michael. It's not going to be about any one particular thing, but the whole point is for it to be kind of fast.
Okay.
All right. And then I'm going to try to do some sound effects too, to, broaden my podcasting experience.
I don't have them on here, so.
You don't?
No.
How do you put them on?
We lost that a long time ago.
It's there. That's the one I want.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. Ready?
Yep.
What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Favorite team?
Cincinnati Bengals. Football, American football.
The all-time favorite player of any sport?
Jerry Rice.
That I got you to meet? Did you meet him once?
Yes.
You met him in San Francisco, right?
Jerry Rice, yeah.
Yeah? Did you live up to the hype?
Yeah, it's nice.
Nice. All right. Favorite place you've lived?
Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, no. Where's the owl? That's supposed to be for FAU. I messed that up. All right. Favorite place you vacationed?
Favorite place I've vacationed? Probably Ireland.
Ireland?
Or Iceland. I like both of those places. Were pretty awesome.
Yeah. If I had to say, I would... You, and not necessarily place, but favorite vacation moment in our lives had to have been you playing... What's that game that you played with Michael and Carson in Key West?
Tetherball.
Oh my gosh, Tetherball. Again, competitive, small children, Tetherball.
I won. I dominated.
He shanked one off Carson's head. Ripped Carson's head that day. But it was hilarious. Everybody had a good time.
I always said, bowling, right? I never allowed my kids to bowl with bumpers.
No, never allows kids to bowl with bumpers.
Because there's no bumpers in the game of life.
That might be too insightful. But proves my point about the good old fashioned competitiveness. All right. Favorite movie?
Glory.
Oh, really? Glory?
I mean, all-time favorite, probably. One of my, yes.
Oh, so the creepy little girl voice. I thought you were going to bring up a horror film. So I was all prepped to do the creepy girl voice.
House of a Thousand Corpses is my favorite horror movie of all time.
Yeah. So really, Glory.
Glory is I've seen it probably 200 times.
Nice. I don't think that's Matthew Broderick's best film.
I mean, he did a pretty good job.
He did a great job.
I mean,
the
cast
is great. I'm just saying, I guess it was...
He was young. I don't know how old he was. Had to be in his 20s when he made that movie.
But you also, to be fair, have never actually seen Ferris Bueller either.
Not the whole thing, no.
So you can't be an accurate judge of the true talent that is Matthew Broderick. So moving on.
Is this a trivia thing, or just why are you asking, trying to learn more about me, or what?
Yeah, I think it's important to know more about you. Yeah. But it's also a little bit of trivia, put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Favorite band?
Killswitch Engage. It's a metal band. Killswitch Engage.
All right. What is a hobby you want to learn that you don't know how to do?
I don't think there's really a hobby out there that I want to learn that I've never done before, but there's a hobby that I really would want to refine and get better at, and that's playing the Native American flute.
All right.
I love playing the Native American flute. It's it really keeps me in the moment, kind of geek out on mindfulness. Playing the Native American flute, number one, I love the way it sounds. Mm-hmm. The one I have, I love the way it sounds. Number two, I love the way it makes me feel mentally, psychologically. And I've never thought of myself as a creative person. Being creative for me was work. It's really something I always try to work at. And it's always clunky and not pretty, and just always felt like it's just choppy. The Native American flute, I'm not good at. I mean, I can hold a tune a little bit with the Native American flute, but I would love to one day get really good at the Native American flute.
I don't think I know what being good... normally when somebody says they want to get good at something, you can reference it. They want to be good wood carver. Well, you can look at a wood carving and you can see it. Or they want to play the guitar well. You can just listen to any famous guitar player and kind of see that level. I don't know, if we have I don't personally know what that measure of a good Native American flute player would be. I think we'd have to find... who's that top? Have you looked at who's the top person? Is there a person?
I have a lot of Native American flute on my music.
Yes, that is true. I know that.
So, I know what
it's supposed to sound
like.
What
it's supposed to sound like. And yes, I don't sound like that. But I would love to, I'm not saying I'm ever going to be this brilliant Native American flutist, but I love the sound that it makes. I love the way it makes me feel. And I would love to one day pour more energy into becoming a very good Native American flutist.
There you go.
And I love the different types of flutes that are out there. There's all kinds of different octaves and note flutes.
And I will say our dogs do kind of zone out a little bit while you're playing it. So there might be something to do with that.
It's a very, it's almost like a haunting sound.
Maybe that's why you're so drawn to it.
Maybe. Yeah. Something about it. Yeah.
Yeah. What is your favorite kind of... Not mindless, that sounds insulting, but what's the thing that you're just man, I'm not getting any more, this isn't making me more intelligent, but favorite thing you like to do that just is because you read all the time, you do all these intensely intellectual things that I see you do, but what's your one, like, I mean, you even turn running into a, you know, the thought experiment with you know, if you're ultra marathoning.
What's that? What do you mean?
So, I mean, to run ultras, you have to be able to sustain yourself over a long period of time. So it's not just like going out and running and like, so even that becomes some sort of discipline and thought experiment. And you never wears headphones when he runs.
Which really blew the mind of my oldest son.
Yes. Yeah. So what's though your mindless thing that you get down with that you're like, man?
Well, I mean, I sat on the couch for about 9 hours yesterday and watched football. So.
Okay, that counts.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't get any smarter watching football yesterday. So.
I mean, maybe. But that's your thing.
Other than the fact when I was watching the Monday Night Football game and I was reading an academic article.
That's what I'm saying. You somehow turned football into.
Yeah, but it's just because the game wasn't exciting. Like.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's no knock against Seattle Seahawks fans, but.
All right.
It wasn't an inspiring game.
What's my favorite color?
Your favorite color is green?
Wait a minute. Do you have like a... All right. There you go. And lastly, and so not deeply, what's your favorite food?
Burritos. Anything you can put in a burrito?
Anything you can put in a burrito. This man puts anything in a burrito.
I'll put soup in a burrito.
You actually have put soup in a burrito.
Yeah, I just had to thicken it up somehow. I don't know how I did it, but...
He does put soup in a burrito. I think with cheese. I think that was the magic thing. But, well, again...
I like refined carbs.
They're so good.
Yeah.
They're so good. And sugar and candy.
Well, I appreciate you. Coming on this
I appreciate
episode.
you too. I appreciate what you do. Leadosophy. Like I said, I'm your number one fan. And thanks for letting me hang out and record this and be a part of it one more time. I definitely feel a little bit better than I did the first time I was on this. I was in a weird spot. I was actually trying to be a leader at the time. Now I'm just trying to be me a little bit. So thanks. Thanks for having me.
You get more time off now than you did back then.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, quite a bit. Not 365, 24/7, 365. So it's been a little bit liberating. Hard to adjust, but...
So we're going to end this with one last trivia question for you.
This was not in the script.
What's the ending? What do I say at the end of every podcast?
I don't know. I'm usually running.
Oh, okay. So we can question really on whether or not you listen to Leadosophy.
I do listen to Leadosophy, but I don't listen to the outro.
Oh, okay. No, what I say before the outro music hits. Remember, Leadosophy is about using the...
Tools of philosophical thought.
To...
Tools of philosophical thought to...
Deepen
our understanding of leadership.
And of life. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Catch you next time.
Thanks for watching and listening to another episode of Leadosophy. If you liked what you heard today, hit that subscribe button and check out Leadosophy.com and learn more about Tim's ideas on philosophy and leadership. We'll see you next time.